On episode 172 of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet birder Heather Wolf, author of Birding at the Bridge. The show notes for this episode can be found at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/172. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. I've got a question for you. Do you have a topic or a guest you'd like for me to cover or interview on the podcast? Email me at 40plusfitnesspodcast@gmail.com to let me know what you want. When I took my daughter Becca to the Galapagos, much of our time was spent watching birds such as finches, penguins, albatross, and of course the blue-footed boobies. I didn't think of myself as a birder, but after talking to Heather Wolf, author of Birding at the Bridge, I guess I am. Bird watching can be a great hobby for health and fitness. Join us as we learn how. So Heather, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks for having me.
Well, when I received your book, my initial reaction was birding. I know what it is. I actually appreciate what birders do because just I think, taking the time to get out into nature and see things and do that. And particularly, the pictures and to help people identify and understand, just the nature of the nature around us, which again, I think a lot of people kind of dismiss, particularly if they've been living in an urban area, not understanding the biodiversity of even the little parks around their neighborhoods. I think is just a huge opportunity for us. So I thought, okay, well, let me give this book a read and let me think through this and see how this relates to health and fitness. And it wasn't long after I got into it where you're into the book and you're talking about being in Pensacola Beach, which, I actually have a place down there. And
that's wild. Yeah.
And I thought, walking around the sand dunes of Pensacola Beach is a workout.
Oh yeah. I miss that.
You get barefooted and your feet are having to work against the sand. And particularly if you're trying to climb to maybe the top of a dune to see another area that you want to kind of investigate, I could see where you could get a pretty good workout being a birder. And so that compelled me to kind of get into your book. And then you moved to New York, which the book is Birding at the Bridge, which is the Brooklyn Bridge. There's a park by the Brooklyn Bridge that you're talking about. And as I kind of looked into it, I'm like, okay, well, if you get to New York, is it just different breeds of pigeon that you're looking for? and the answer to that was pretty quickly, well, no, you saw a different bird here, a different bird there. And you set this, again, when I first saw it, I was like, she's out of her mind. 100 different birds in this park, which, is not, I can't imagine it's a huge park because the price of real estate in Brooklyn, I saw an article today that it's probably the highest real estate in the country right now is the Brooklyn area. So I'm like, there can't be much land allocated to this little park. So the thought that you were going to and set a bodacious goal of finding 100 different birds over the course of your birding, knowing that different birds come through there at different times of the year, I thought that was pretty intriguing. And I'm not gonna give away the secret of whether you found your 100 birds or not. But, again, it's this book that the more I read it, the more I appreciated what birding was and what it could bring to us as we're looking for ways to improve our health and fitness.
Oh, great. Well, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. And you definitely got the gist of it. I mean, it's really amazing. The thing was, I started birding on Pensacola Beach, which you know well. And I really got in tune with nature living in that environment. And one of my favorite memories actually was jogging along Pensacola Beach, and there were a group of manta rays, which aren't birds, but hey, they're wildlife. And I followed them north and just ran alongside of them. And I got an amazing workout doing that. And that was just great. And then when I was going for a jog on one of the paths that run through the dunes on the beach, I actually noticed this bird that was kind of going crazy. And it started to almost dive bomb me. And that kind of prompted me to do more research into the birds. And it's amazing when I moved back to New York and discovered, what could I find in this park? I knew Central Park and Prospect Park is another big Brooklyn park. They have a lot of birds, but this smaller park by me, I wasn't sure what I would find. Like you mentioned, would it be just pigeons or gulls or something like that? So during migration in spring and fall, it really presented just an amazing array of birds, and that prompted me to start this, what I call is my little quest in the big city, to find at least 100 birds in Brooklyn Bridge Park.
So you basically start down in Pensacola, and you're on the beach, which people travel hundreds of miles to go to Pensacola Beach, and I know why, because I love it too. But you get into New York, and again, I would think pigeon, different pigeon, maybe pigeon, and it just, but you basically as a birder then know that there are different species that are going to be in the area. There's a small park. And I think one of the core things is you picked a place that was convenient and close to home. You didn't have to go far to find an appropriate birding place.
And that's always been a thing with me for fitness. I've always belonged to a gym that was on the way home. It's really tough for me to go out of the way to fit something in. It makes it so much easier if it's right there. And now Brooklyn Bridge Park, where I birded, it's 85 acres. So it's not a tiny park, but it's a lot smaller than Central. But it is about a block away from me. So yeah, it was very easy to head out there. And one of the great things is in the winter, it's freezing cold, and a lot of people, it's hard to get motivated to get out there and get up and go for a walk or a run. But if you know what's waiting for you there right across the street, these colorful ducks that are exhibiting courtship behaviors and things like that, it's incentive to get out there and go for a nice brisk walk and observe some birds.
Yeah, I'll sit on my patio in Pensacola, and I'll just early in the morning when there's just a ton of birding activity along the dunes. And you'll see the birds feeding, you'll see them nesting and doing other things. But so it's just, that's part of kind of my morning de-stressing meditation, just kind of reflecting on things there with the birds, because the birds are always out there. And it's just, when I first moved in, I happened to see dolphins out in the water, but right now, the one thing I can count on every morning when I go out there is that the birds are going to be in the dunes, and it's seasonal there as well. That, even in the fall, even the winter, when it's a little bit chilly, put on a sweater and I can sit there and look out over and get to see different types of birds that I didn't see in the spring and summer. So it is kind of interesting. It's always changing, and it's always going to be kind of this symphony thing of, they're entertaining, to watch their activities and try to understand what they're doing. I'm not a professional birder, so I don't know the behavior of birds, but, again, it's just something that I find very entertaining, and just see it as a good opportunity to get us outside and off the couch.
Exactly. And one of my favorite things about birding is kind of what you mentioned, getting up in the morning, starting your day with that scene. And it brings you into the moment. It's a really good way to be mindful, which is really good for our health, great for stress relief. It's especially living in New York City, it's really easy to get caught up in the rat race and to just get amongst nature. Sometimes out in the park, I forget I'm in the city. I talk about this a lot in the book, and just I think I'm in some forest somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and it feels like that when you hear the bird song and you are so in tune with nature. And that's mindfulness is so good for the brain health, and it just reduces your stress levels. So I think without birding in the city, I just don't know. I don't know how I'd do.
Well, and that's what I'm saying. You would have to drive, potentially you would drive outside of the city on weekends and things like that to fill that need in your life, because you got the bug. I mean, and that's another side of this is, I tell a lot of people when they start getting into something that makes them feel good, and it's good for them, like, moving around and doing the birding, you become addicted to it. It just kind of becomes a part of the nature of who you are. It's not whether you're going to get up tomorrow and go birding. It is, you are getting up in the morning and going birding, because that's when the birds are out there. And even in personal training, I tell them, the personal trainers, most of them, you're going to want to work out with them in the morning or the evening, because you have the work day. And so when are you going to make an appointment with a personal trainer? So when are personal trainers busiest? Before work and after work. So you have to choose. And I tell a lot of people it's easier to choose that morning time because other people won't pick that as much. And so you're going to get better trainers in the morning that are available. And then the other side of it is you've got it done for the day.
Yeah, and you can't back out of it. You have to just get out there.
But with birding, it can be different. Other than I imagine, you do a good bit of your birding individually there, but you've worked with other people and done group things and worked with a coach effectively to help you get started.
Yeah, when I lived in Pensacola Beach, I had a couple of mentors, Bob and Lucy Duncan. The book is dedicated to them, and I learned a lot from them. And that's what I'd highly recommend if you want to get into birding is to look into your local Audubon chapter and get started that way. And there's always people willing to help. So that's just a great way to get started. But yeah, I mean, the other thing about being in the park, I've always been into fitness, so a lot of times in birding, you're waiting for a bird, like say it disappeared into the bushes or something like this, and you're waiting for it to come back out, or you just know it's going to get really good once the sun comes out or something like that. You can do, and I do this often, I'll do walking lunges across the lawn while I'm waiting for the birds to appear, or I'll do step ups or angled push-ups against a bench, something like that. So I'm not doing this at the moment, but I have in the past started my birding with the 7-minute workout. So when I arrived at the park, I would do the 7-minute workout, and then, hey, I had that done, and then I would continue with the brisk walk and birding.
Well, in the cooler weather, I mean, the funny thing is there's two aspects to that. If you were doing this in a colder climate, we're coming into the fall here in North America, so it's going to be cooling off a good bit. So you get outside, and there's actually now studies that show that exposing yourself to the cold has health benefits. Basically, the gist is this: there's actually two types of body fat. There's a white body fat and there's a brown body fat. Now, the brown body fat was the kind of body fat that we had as babies. And that body fat is very active. It actually puts off hormones and does a lot to help keep us warm. So a baby, is born naked and afraid and cold and wet, but they've got more of this brown fat. And that brown fat, like I said, is very active. So it helps you burn energy. It helps you stay warm. So by being exposed to the cold, your body adapts to want more brown fat. So you'll be in better shape the next time you're exposed to the cold. So you end up with a healthier version of fat in your body. Additionally, you're obviously out there, your body is just going to be burning more calories to keep you at a good core temperature. So, that your 7-minute workout is probably the best thing in the world because you're exposed to the cold, you're doing that workout, you're warming up your body to help stay warm. And then you carry that with you as you do, like you said, your brisk walking to get to the spot where you want to be. All of that works together to make you a much healthier and fitter person.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that information. That makes me feel a lot better.
Yeah, so, you did it naturally, but that is actually probably the best thing you can do is to go ahead and get yourself active in the morning, get out there, warm up a little bit, before you get outside and start trying to do that stuff, because a cold muscle is not ready for a whole lot of activity. But once you're into it, yeah, really start moving, get your heart beating, get your body warmed up. And then again, fighting that cold weather a little bit. So, not bundling up quite as much, using your energy to heat you rather than the jacket.
I do notice that. Yeah, I try to lay off the, heavy jackets and sweaters. Even this morning, it's pretty cold in New York right now, but I was out there and I found myself taking off some of the layers I had over bundled up. But yeah, I mean, the great thing too is when you talk about starting with the workout and then taking that brisk walk to the location where you want to bird. I think that's a great point is wherever you like to bird, try to make it so that you can do a brisk walk there. Because if you start too early, you may find yourself that you just staying there watching birds. So you want to get to a location. And if that doesn't happen, you can also do that after. A lot of times I will bike. I have a city bike, which is a bike membership program in New York City. And I'll take a bike ride in the morning to my birding location so I can change it up a bit. Because the thing with birding, all the walking, you get so much walking. It's really amazing. But sometimes you do want to change it up.
Have you ever wore a Fitbit just to see how far a standard
Oh
birding would
gosh,
take you?
no, I haven't. But I
Okay,
mean,
that's your next book. You got to
yeah,
start wearing a
yeah.
Fitbit and birding for fitness. Yeah, there you go.
Seriously. But yeah, it's really good. But yeah, it's really important to stretch after birding too, because with all of that walking, it can really tighten up your legs. But stretching, like you said, warm up before, stretch after.
So we've kind of gone over a good bit of the health benefits, and I'll kind of recap those. Obviously you're outside, so you're not sitting. That's a win. You're not watching TV, so you're probably giving your eyes what they need. Another thing I'll put out there is when you expose yourself to sunlight and particularly blue light, which is what's outside for us during the day, that's going to help you reset your circadian rhythm and make you sleep better that night. So getting out and getting some sun exposure, particularly in the morning, is very good for us from a health perspective of sleeping better. And then obviously the walking is one of the best exercises you can do, because typically when you're doing that, you're in this low intensity fat burning stage. So you're not in a sugar burning stage. You're just basically in that conditioning where your body can rely on fat to fuel itself. There's the stress reduction, although I imagine you would probably get a little bit hyper and stressed trying to find a bird or get the bird to come out of the bush or wanting the bird to come out of the bush. But
Yeah, well, now that the book is done, it's less stress. Although on my blog, I do post pictures, but it's definitely, yeah, you're right.
And like you said, you kind of mentioned in there, you bought yourself a really good camera because you wanted to chronicle this a little bit better, and maybe a little bit there. So if you're an A-type, you sound a little bit more like an A-type personality once you get started with this, because you set a goal and it's like you're going to get there, and then right up to the edge, you're really pushing yourself. But at any rate, it can be as intense or stress relieving as possible. I can tell you, like when I'm sitting there watching the birds on the sand dune, I'm not gonna. I don't mean this in a bad way because I'm not so much a birder. I love birds, but I don't care what kind of bird that is. I'm just interested, right? I'm just interested in watching the nature of the bird be a bird.
Well, and I mean, that's such a great point, is because there are different levels, and it's easy to get intimidated sometimes when you go to certain birding clubs or things like that, where people are such experts, and you just think, oh well, I'll never get to that point, or I don't really want to get to that point, and you don't have to. Just observing the resident birds, a mockingbird or a cardinals that are in your backyard, can give you the same benefits that birding to the extreme can. I mean, it's still exciting. There are so many behaviors that you can look at with just even the common birds that will really reduce your stress levels. And one other point I wanted to make that we didn't touch on was you can vary your difficulty of your walk or your hike depending on your location. So certain birds can only be found at higher elevations. And I went on a birding trip to Arizona, and we had to hike a little bit to get certain species. So once you get into birding, you may want to take trips, or even depending on where you live, you may have certain species in higher elevations that will up your heart rate a little bit on a more intense hike.
Yeah, and I think this kind of goes back. I want to go back a little on that, because when you set a goal like that, like you knew going to Arizona that you were going to be doing a little bit more aggressive hiking, it's incumbent on us then to say, okay, now I need to make sure that the training I'm doing, and if I'm doing any physical training like at the gym or running, or I need to incorporate some training that's going to put me in better conditioning for that exercise. So there are some hills in New York, not exactly like what you would have been dealing with in that part of Arizona, but just saying, I know I'm going to be here, or maybe you're going to go to altitude. And so trying to prepare your body to function better at altitude is a whole set of training that you can focus on. So, knowing that you have that goal there, like I just signed up for a Spartan Super next summer. I've done a couple I've done some that like that. This one won't be any further or any worse than the others I've done. It's just, I want to do that. I want to do it with my daughter again. And so now, because I have that event, I'll work on conditioning myself for that. So it makes the other things I do, like when I'm going to go to the gym in a few minutes after this call and go get on the elliptical and do some high intensity interval training. The reason I'm doing that is I want to have that quick start speed for the things that I'm going to need when it's time for me to do that spark.
You're so right. I mean, having a goal, having something that you're working towards always makes fitness just so much more exciting and easier and motivating. And it just, it all makes sense because it's so difficult to just do it just to, to lose weight or whatever, which it's really just to stay healthy. And you always want to be active, and having those little things along the way that motivate you, trips or events, really makes a difference.
And so again, birding is kind of one of those things that you can do at any fitness level initially, and you can work up to climbing the Alps and finding the condor or something. uh, but I guess that's where they're from. I have no idea.
I'm not sure. I don't know. I know they're out in California, but I don't know about the Alps.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I was just throwing two things together and hoping they'd stick. But so beyond, you mentioned this before, beyond kind of hiring a guide or finding maybe volunteer guides in your area through the Audubon or other organizations to help you initially get started and how you would identify a bird and how to go about all the things that you would do birding. What are some other tips that you would give us?
Well, to get into birding, I think the first thing you want to do is just observe the birds in your area, because there are birds there. Listen for the sounds and songs that they are making and try to take a look at them. And then get a field guide. I like a paper field guide that just shows you pictures of birds. And that's how I started. You just look through it. You'll start to recognize certain birds. It'll show you the distribution of where the birds are. And you can get field guides for the North American region. I have one of those. You can get them for Florida. So you can get big ones or regional ones specific to even like Tucson has one for cities. And then binoculars are great to have. Now, if you're bird watching on Pensacola Beach, you can see a lot of those birds without binoculars. You have the large herons and things like that. But if you want to start seeing the smaller birds, you'll want to get a pair of binoculars. But I work for Cornell Lab of Ornithology as a web developer, and they have a lot of great resources for getting started birding. One of my favorites is the Merlin Bird ID app, which is a free app. And what it does is it asks you a few questions, just very simple questions about the bird that you're looking at. And based on that, it will spit out the options of what bird it could be based on real data of birds that are being sighted in your area. So that is definitely a great way to get started with Merlin Bird ID app.
Okay, yeah, and the website there, the other resource you were talking about, they have a website, and I went on there, and you log your birds as you find them if you want to be a part of this, and literally then you can know, if you look in your area, the types of birds that people are spotting at about that time of year.
Right. I think you're talking about eBird, right? eBird.org. Yeah. And that's another one of my favorite sites. That's also put out by Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And there's two great things about eBird. One is, like you said, you can submit your sightings. So I submitted a checklist today, which adds a motivator to it, because you're keeping a list and you can have a profile where people can see what you're looking at.
And it's gamified. It's gamified. If you want to be competitive, they've got a scorecard, and you can see who's the top 100 in your region or within the last couple of weeks or all time. Yeah, it's
exactly. And the other thing one of my favorite things about it is, and this is important when you're getting started, is you need to know what is in your area, because if you just go out there and you're not sure where to look or what to look for, it can be frustrating. I remember I used to go out to Fort Pickens in the middle of summer. Fort Pickens is near Pensacola Beach. And there were no birds in the middle of summer, but I did not know that because I just didn't have the knowledge.
There's the great Florida mosquito.
That's true. That's true. And there were birds around the shoreline, but I just didn't know, like in the actual woodland habitat. But the thing is, with eBird, you can type in, if you go to ebird.org and say explore a region, you can type in your county, your local park, anything like that, and it will show you the birds that are being seen there now. So you look at that, you can then look it up in your field guide or online so you know what to look for. And you can tell where the birds are showing up based on the number of sightings in each park or location.
Yeah, and I think another thing you mentioned in the book, kind of mentioned, you didn't, maybe, yeah, I'm not sure if you said this directly, but beyond just what the bird looks like, sometimes the bird will have a behavior or a sound that will also help you identify what that bird is.
Right. I mean, really the biggest factor in identifying birds is size and shape. more so than the individual colors. But behavior gives a really big clue because a lot of birds, some will kind of bob their tail up and down or wag their tail. Some flycatchers will return to the same perch after catching a fly, and others won't. So based on that information, you can say, oh, well, that doesn't behave like the kind of flycatcher that would return to their perch. Some birds like to forage low under the trees. And it's really interesting because just the other night, I was in the park, and there's this one tree that had all these different wood warblers. Wood warblers breed in North America, and they head back down south for winter to South America and the Caribbean and things like that. But there were 5 different species of warblers in this one tree, and they were all behaving somewhat differently because some of them like to be high in the tree, some of them like to be low, things like that. So you really clue into how different how different species behave once you get into this. And that just makes it so cool.
Okay. Any other tips for someone wanting to get started?
I mentioned earlier about a local Audubon chapter, so definitely look into that and go on some bird walks. I lead bird walks here. If you're in Brooklyn, you can come on one of my walks. Pretty much anywhere you are, there'll be people willing to help and show you around and get you started.
So yeah, if you're going to take a trip up to New York City, allot one more day to go birding in Brooklyn. Heather, this has been really good. I've enjoyed the conversation. Like I said, I'll be the guy who just wants the zen of just watching birds be birds. And again, yeah, I guess if I see a really strange bird, just all of a sudden, I'll probably get on the internet and try to figure out what
you can
I
email
just saw.
me.
Yeah. Or, get that app, download that app and be able to do what I want to do. But if someone wanted to get in touch with you, where would you have me send them?
Yeah, well, you can reach me at heatherwolf.com, and that has information on my upcoming walks and also a link to my blog. I post pictures of the birds of Brooklyn Bridge Park several times throughout the week, so you can know what's showing up there.
That's awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on 40 Plus Fitness.
Well, thank you so much, Alan. It's been great.
Okay, for those of you that celebrate Halloween, I want you to enjoy yourself, be safe, but hey, let's skip the candy. We just don't need the sugar. Next time on the 40 Plus Fitness podcast, we meet with Dr. Michael Bruce, author of The Power of When. Discover your chronotype and the best time to eat lunch, ask for a raise, have sex, write a novel, take your meds, and more. Until then, have a happy and healthy day.